Hi there, and welcome along to episode 103 of the Gersnet Weekly Podcast, the totally free and independent Rangers podcast that is made by the fans for the fans. As I say, episode 103, we've been going strong for a few years now, but if it is your first time, then thank you very much for joining us, and you are, of course, very, very welcome. There's a huge treasure trove of episodes for you to go back and catch up on. I would say, go and listen to our 100th episode. It was spectacular. We had a big party. But that was the day we drew 0-0 with Livingston. So actually, maybe listen to 99 or 101 slightly jollier affairs. If you are new, then please do be aware that the podcast is going out live every Sunday evening at 9:30. We're live right now on YouTube. And if you want to get involved in the show, please do join us for shows going forward. Leave us your comments, your questions, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. Otherwise, the show is available for download every Monday morning. And that's on Acast, iTunes, YouTube, Castbox, Stitcher, and also on Spotify. So please do download that, subscribe, give us comments, give us wee ratings. It all helps to get the word out on the pod. What also helps getting the word out and getting the quality up is having two top drawer guests, and I'm delighted to say that that's what we have this evening. So you'll forgive me for saying that I'm Ross Bennett and you're stuck with me in the driving seat, but thankfully we have got two of the most respected voices in Scottish football. First of all, I will introduce a chap who apparently is giving up his dream of playing five-a-side professionally to take up hill walking. And today, I believe he's now got the record of walking up more hills than Enya. A very warm welcome to Colin Armstrong. Colin, how are you?
I'm very sore, Ross. The top drawer comment, by the way. Thank you very much for that. That was unexpected. But I was up Ben Lomond today. First Monroe bagged. Me and my daughter were up there, so good way to sort of spend the Sunday. Although, as I was saying before we came on air, we got lost, quite dramatically lost on the way there. So we ended up, we were like 2 hours late getting started, and so it meant things were a bit tight coming back. So I'm literally not long in. And I've not even had my shower yet, and I'm sitting here providing some top drawer content for the show tonight.
Well, we'll try and do top drawer content. I've been sort of racking my brains for the last couple of days trying to scrabble together a few different topics of conversation that we can discuss tonight to try and eke out an hour of podcast. If it gets kind of a bit sketchy at around about 10 o'clock, I might ask you to recount the full tale of you getting lost around Ben Lomond, but hopefully we don't get to that. Also with us this evening, and as always, I'm very, very delighted to welcome him along. It's probably the only journalist that I've ever heard a Rangers fan describe as not being controlled by Peter Lawwell. It's Stewart Weir. Stewart, how are you this evening?
I'm doing very well, actually. I have to say, I'm always impressed at anyone who manages to, climb up hills or mountains that are over 3,000 feet and then start making notes of how many they've actually bagged, so to speak. I know there's some people I do know who have written books on the subject and are into hundreds of them. So you've got a long way to go, but it's good to see you've started.
I'm at number 5, so I do have a long way. I've got one Monroe, but we've got 4 other hills under our belt. Can I just say something as well, Ross? It was like the Ben Lomond Celtic Supporters Club up there the day. Every second person had the hoops on. You know what I mean? I was just like, this is murder. I mean, I'm not that bothered when it comes to the sort of religious divide in Glasgow, but even I was going, there's no many Protestants up this hill, is there? Celtic tops galore.
It's funny you say that, because myself and my partner today we're looking to move house soon, so we were driving around another wee corner of London, having a look at it, looking at potential properties. What's the high street like? What's all the amenities like in the area? And we drove past 2 folk in Celtic tops and just went, right, not moving here. This is getting a big tick off the list.
A big tick, aye.
So that's the kind of barometer for places that I want to go. Also on the drive there, we saw a sticker for a London Emerald Supporters Club, and I thought, absolutely boking on that. So
it's true what they say. They're like rats. You know what I mean? You're never more than 6 feet away from one of them.
Aye, and they live in the sewers. Right, gents, as we've kind of alluded to, I think there might be a wee bit of padding in this podcast, as there's not been a great deal of Rangers topics going on. We're going to have a wee look at the international break and the Rangers representation that's been going on over the last few days. We'll also take some time to reflect on the season so far and the current state of the squad. and then take a little look at the plans for Edmiston House, or new Edmiston House, should I say, that have been released recently, and maybe start thinking about what else we can do in the run-up to the 150th anniversary of the club next year. So with that in mind, obviously it is an international break, and I know that can be very challenging for folk like myself who live and breathe Rangers and don't really care too much about the Scotland national team. I will tend to watch with a kind of casual apathy, and then want Scotland to do well, but don't begrudge Israel when they score quite a lovely little finish as well. But Colin, this international break, I think there's been a marked increase in the number of Rangers players being called away for international duty. We've got 3 from the club in the Scotland squad, Robbie McCrory being there as well, obviously out on loan at the moment. We've got players in Croatia, players in Finland, players in Sweden as well, and then a very, very healthy representation at youth level on top of that. So it probably is the greatest level of Rangers players being sent away for international duty for a good number of years. Is that a good indication of how far the squad has come and the quality of player that we now have at the club?
I would think it is, really. Yeah, if you look back over history, there's been a couple of occasions in my period supporting the club where, there wasn't a huge amount of international players. Now, for me, international football is, enjoy the World Cup finals and the Euros and all the rest of it. It sort of fills a summer, but I have to admit I don't have, much interest in it during the qualifying period. Everything that's happened with, the SFA and the Scottish national team and the Tartan Army, and I used to quite enjoy when Scotland played, because you kind of down tools on the usual rivalries and everybody met up and we all supported the one team. It hasn't felt like that for a long, long time, and I've genuinely lost interest in Scotland. We've discussed this before in the pod, and I've even watched the game on Friday night. I think I watched about 5 minutes of it, and then me and my daughter stuck a movie on. But the fact that Rangers have so many players on international duty would suggest, that we're improving on that front. We're kind of damned if we do and damned if we don't. You know what I mean? When we don't have a huge amount of players on there, I'm always like, oh God, we don't have many international players, and that means we're shite and all the rest of it. But when you do have players of that quality, you're grumbling because they're getting pulled away, and you worry about maybe picking up an injury. I always remember McCoy's breaking his leg for Scotland. It is what it is. But I think most of the teams that are successful, most of your clubs that are successful will have a healthy amount of internationalists in there. So as much as it's a pain, and as much as I don't like to see the players go out and ply their trade elsewhere and risk getting injured, I think it does show that the club's in probably a healthier position player-wise than it's been for a while. There was a period not that long ago we didn't have any internationals. So when I was growing up in the 80s and Rangers were struggling, we only had Davy Cooper at one point, and we didn't really win. We certainly didn't win any leagues at that point, but when Terry Butchers and, your Chris Woods and all these other guys came, all these other international players, we started to win. So hopefully the same thing will happen this time. We've got more internationalists in the setup. As I said, I don't like to see them go out the door and ply their trade elsewhere for a week or two, but I think, to answer your question, it does show that the club is in as healthy a position it's been player-wise for a good number of years.
Yeah, and it's good in terms of raising the profile of the club as well. Obviously, you send players like Borna Barisic off to play in the Nations League, playing at the very top level, when, to be fair, the Croatia side was somewhat humiliated by a very, very good Portugal team. But it is, I think it's a nice thing to look and see your players going off and representing, top teams across Europe, not kind of the real dregs of European competition, but some good teams there. Teams obviously who qualified for European competition, qualified for the Euros. I think it's very healthy to see that we as a top club should be littered with top players who represent their country. But you make an interesting point there, Colin, about how there have been times when there have been weak Rangers squads and that hasn't led to representation in the national team. And actually looking at our squad at the moment, obviously only 2 current Rangers first team players have made the Scotland squad. Stuart, I heard on the radio again yesterday that there were more calls particularly as we move into a kind of post-EU Britain, that player, what am I trying to say, importing of foreign and overseas players, the rules on that could change, and that could have a knock-on effect in terms of domestic player registration rules, and that particularly in England, the English FA is looking at, again, introducing mandatory minimum numbers of homegrown players in their squads. Do you think that similar rules such as that in Scotland could be introduced, saying, okay, if 3 out of your starting 11 have to be homegrown at club, or 5 have to be homegrown in the country? Do you think that those kind of rules could help the national team? And if so, would it also hinder the progress of clubs like Rangers and Celtic?
We did have that in a form going back to the early 90s, when you had to have assimilated players playing at European level. Therefore, you had the what was known as the 3 foreigner rule, which meant that in the early 90s, when Walter Smith had just become manager, Rangers had a pretty deliberate policy then of going out and signing Scottish players, and could go out and sign the best Scottish players. So, you had the likes of Davy Robertson, Alan McLaren, guys like that suddenly becoming Rangers players. Andy Gorham was another, simply because Rangers needed them for European competition. And to be honest, I think if you can sign the biggest and best domestically, then I've always thought you probably strengthen your hand, probably strengthen your team. I think if you look at some of the best Rangers teams over the years, there has been a good spattering of Scotland internationals in that team. So I don't think it does you any harm. I think the thing about international football just now, which is utterly alien to just about everyone in every nation, is that there are guys playing international football who haven't really played very many games for their country. I mean, it might be slightly different in Scotland, but ultimately there are international matches being played here between teams who are at all different levels in terms of whether they've started the season, how far into the season they are, and it's difficult to gauge actually where some of the players are at. I think when it comes to international football in general, is it a good thing that there's an international break just now? I don't really know, because if you ask me the same in October, or you ask me the same again in November or March or whenever, I would probably come up with the same answer. Because in terms of players, I've heard it over the years that international breaks are unwanted distractions, because they kind of break momentum. I've also heard that they are pleasant distractions, because they get you away from the domestic action and let you concentrate on something else for a bit. And I've heard that from players and managers. So I think it's actually how you're feeling at the time. I think if you've maybe had a run of games where you haven't been playing particularly well, and you're trying to find a bit of form and try to get your game together, I don't think you'd be wanting an international break. Equally, you could say that when you do have a run of form, you don't want the sort of style of play or the type of play that you're putting together broken in any way, shape, or form by international matches, because then it becomes an unwanted distraction. So, I'll be interested to see how the Rangers players who have been away on international duty now return back to Ibrox after this break, to see if they can pick up, where they've left off.
You sort of preempted my next question there, Stuart. Is that point around momentum and whether the international break is a help or a hindrance? If we think about Rangers' current situation, we've had, in my view, a very, very strong start to the season, obviously kind of matching records in terms of our defensive capacity this season. And it seems to me that, I've said on the pod before, I think momentum is one of the most important things in football, in league football. and the impact of momentum should never be overstated. Now, to me, it seems Rangers had very strong, very good momentum, had picked up some decent results in places that we struggled before. And Celtic, on the other hand, were really grinding out results and were struggling to put together decent performances. Celtic also, because of the COVID situation, have a points disadvantage, and they're chasing to try and make that up, albeit with a couple of games in hand. It seems to me that Rangers would not be welcoming this international break as much as Celtic might be, because it does give them a chance to regroup and refocus. Do you think that that's fair?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, a couple of minutes ago there, it depends on your mindset. I mean, as I say, I have seen players who are absolutely flying before an international break, but think they need a break away from club football, simply because they know that when they come back, they have to refocus again, and therefore they're looking to pick up where they left off and continue how they've been playing. And other players want away just to forget how the season's actually going. So I don't think there's a definitive answer to that one. What I would say about Rangers just now is that I do think this is a chance for Steven Gerrard to sort of wave farewell to a lot of his players, say, go and do your bit for your country and I'll see you back here in a fortnight, and sort of be waiting at the door for them as they step through the door, just to remind them of what they were doing or what they'd achieved before they'd gone away, and make it known he expected more of the same from them now that they were back. And again, sometimes you need a break just to take stock. This is an interesting international break as well, because it comes bang smack in the middle of a transfer window as well. And does this give Rangers a chance in terms of recruitment? Does it give them a chance to do some housekeeping when various players are away, and maybe try and work at getting another couple of players out the door so they can bring somebody else in? I think at times we might be saying that on the pitch we didn't really want this, but equally it could be a time where the likes of Steven Gerrard and his backroom staff are saying, yeah, this is a good chance just to reset, get some business done and dusted, and then kick on from where we are in the table. Only time will tell, and the next time Rangers take to the pitch, we'll certainly know whether this has been a good or a bad thing.
I think you make a very interesting point there, Stuart, about mentality, and the outcome from this international break might depend on the mentality of the players. Now, Colin, we've questioned or discussed the mentality as a bit of a running theme throughout our previous 102 episodes, so let's carry it on here. Unfortunately, Rangers players have shown that even when they have a lot of momentum, if there's a prolonged gap or absence from football, they might not have the mentality to pick it up and keep running with it. And I'm thinking back to the last two winter breaks in particular, where we ended the first half of the season very, very strong and then capitulated in January, February. Is there a danger that a sort of mini version of that absence hangover might rear its head here?
Yeah, I would hope not. I mean, because we went through the winter breaks at the same point last season. I mean, the winter breaks tend to come at the same time most seasons, so we'd had these kind of small breaks already. So you would hope we would not come back in the same sort of state that we came back from Dubai. I mean, there's all sorts of rumours as to why that was. I suppose we'll never know. But no, I would like to think that the players are ticking over in terms of fitness. The ones that are on international duty are. So no, I would hope that given we've had these sort of winter breaks, international breaks before, it's just a week or whatever, that they'll come back and keep going. So that's the hope. And there's no winter break this year, so hopefully the small international breaks that do come along won't break that momentum. I've said this before, and a couple of weeks ago in one of the pods, that given the mentality issues that we've had in the past, I think no supporters being there at the moment is maybe benefiting one or two guys, because Ibrox can be a difficult place to play for Rangers. If things aren't going well. I mean, I genuinely think sometimes as a support we are totally unrealistic, and we do the opposite at times of what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to support the team. We're supposed to be that 12th man. We're supposed to carry them over the line. And I just think too many Rangers supporters at times think, well, it's Dunfermline or it's whoever the day, they should be 2-3 up by 20 minutes. I mean, that doesn't happen. They come on, they come down hard on the team. Some players can deal with that. They don't bother. I think all your sort of stronger players in Rangers history are the ones that were able to deal with that. Some can't, and some start playing within themselves, taking the easy option and maybe not taking a wee chance and trying to create something. So yeah, I think no supporters at Ibrox. Don't get me wrong, away from home I think it could be different. Although you could argue that works in our favour as well, because going to Pittodrie a couple of weeks ago was a canter compared to what it normally is. You're normally getting dogs abuse up at Pittodrie. So I think the no supporter thing could maybe help a couple of those players, deal with the pressure, and then gradually supporters come back in. Hopefully they'll have enough behind them, enough belief behind them to deal with the stick and all the rest of it when it eventually does come back. So yeah, I think they've showed good momentum so far. I would hope that an international break wouldn't disrupt that. There's no winter break, so again that wouldn't disrupt the momentum. And there's no supporters at the moment, and I think that could help a few years players. So I think a lot of stuff is kind of going in our favour at the moment, and hopefully, as I said, I don't think it will. I don't think this current break will disrupt that momentum.
That's very good to hear. Stuart, as I alluded to earlier, in my opinion, it's been a very strong opening phase of this season. 2 points dropped, a very healthy goal difference, and no goals conceded. As the league table sort of starts to take shape, what's been your overriding view and opinion of this first section of the season so far?
That Rangers play better without fans. I don't think, I think what was mentioned there about the levels of pressure being applied. I think some players are deeply affected by that, and it might be that they're able to focus better on on winning games and playing football just now than worrying about how the fans are going to respond to them. I'm interested in what Colin was saying there, and as much as it will be interesting once the fans do start to come back into Ibrox, first of all, how they get behind the team and what if there is criticism of the team, what that will be, but also how the players handle that as well. And I think Rangers have made a good start to the season. I think that they have picked up results and 3 points in most of the matches without looking spectacularly brilliant at times. I think they've managed to be very competent in their performances, get the job done without having to push themselves, or indeed without being pressed too much. I think, when push comes to shove, it might be that we'll see just what this Rangers side are actually made of. But just now, it's a decent start. And again, when Steven Gerrard is maybe being critical of the wastefulness in front of goal, and maybe not taking as many chances, and that's about the only thing he's had to pick up on this far, then I think that must mean that you've made a pretty good start to the season. The Livingston game, bit of an aberration, but then again, I honestly don't think I think that's down to the mindset. I think people actually turned up there thinking to themselves, this is going to be difficult and we don't really like playing here, without actually just going out and trying to win the game first and foremost. The other games since then, Kilmarnock with a pretty regulation 2-0 victory, as was the game against Hamilton Accies. So whatever Rangers have been asked to do this far, they've done. I think it'll be more testing now, simply because they'll have a bit of a target on themselves because they're at the top of the table, and because I would imagine the games are now going to start getting a bit more difficult.
So we find ourselves, Stuart, sort of sticking with this mentality theme, and yourself and Colin do seem to agree that Rangers are playing better, and that the absence of fans has actually been a positive in terms of the results on pitch. And that brings us back to a long-standing conversation about mentality and can players cope with the weight of the shirt? And obviously we've got a captain who was signed from Wigan, who will not have experienced pressure like this anywhere else in his career, and even admitted in his programme notes that him and his team are not coping well with the pressure last season. I think it's a question that's been asked a number of times before, but in your opinion, is there anything that needs to be done in terms of recruitment that can identify players that can cope with the weight of the shirt, so that we don't have to worry about the impact of our own fans on the team?
Look at the Rangers team. I mean, I think the situation of who plays up front has to be resolved one way or another, and I think the sooner that happens, the better. I think that it has. I think Rangers need a midfielder who can get into the penalty box and contribute either as a creator or as a goal scorer. I think that Rangers have been crying out for that for a couple of seasons. I mean, I'm quite impressed with the way that Ryan Kent has started the season. It's almost as if, he's been told since the off, and he's taken it on board, and as a result has upped his game, that you are our potential match winner in every game. It doesn't matter whether you want to play on the left, through the middle, or on the right. We'll accommodate and shuffle around to let you play wherever it is you want. He almost has played like a spare man at times, and I think we've seen over the first couple of weeks of the season that he's responded to that challenge and he's played pretty well. But I do think midfield wise, I think Rangers could be doing with somebody who is able. I mean, Steven Gerrard was able to play as both an attacking midfielder and a holding midfielder. He was able to boss the game almost in the sort of quarterback position, but he was also able to get forward and score goals. I don't think he would be so lucky as to find somebody in his image, but that's the kind of player I think that Rangers are crying out for, just to give another threat in front of goal, but also to give the opposition something else to contend with. Whether that comes around or not, I'm not sure. I think there's a deficiency in the midfield at Ibrox in that position, and even though you look at it, you see, well, he could do this or he could do that. I don't think there's anybody there who is a natural in that position. These guys usually cost money and cost a lot of money, but you would have to think that, given the way that Ryan Kent came into the Rangers team to start with as a loanee and then eventually was signed, that there'll be teams in England or in the continent with players that could fulfil that role. So whether he wants to change the model of the team or whether he wants to change it, that you're only with more like one holding midfield player, I'm not sure. But I do think just even to augment the squad would be a useful kind of acquisition at this time.
Colin, coming to you, what's been your kind of key takeaway from the start of the season so far, and really how do you rate the performances of the team, but also the position that they find themselves in the league?
Yeah, well, I think overall you have to say, what is it, 6 games, 5 wins, 1 draw, scoring plenty and not conceded any. I'm struggling to find a negative and all that, and it strikes me as a wee bit typical. Some within the support. I mean, I've got one mate in particular. Of all the positivity that's been sort of happening so far this season, he just focuses on that one draw. And that's what he talks about. He just talks about that Livingston game. We couldn't do this, we couldn't do that. And look, the Livingston game was disappointing, but I genuinely feel that Livingston made it really difficult for us that day. It was almost like a back six we were playing at times, and we just couldn't break them down. And other teams have gone there and struggled to do that. Hamilton last week, they were a wee bit more open, and we've won fairly comfortably. I think overall we've looked very good this season. I think the fact that we're not conceding goals is a great thing. I always remember Stuart Monroe when he was at Rangers saying that when Graham Souness arrived, that was the first thing that Souness dealt with was the defence. It's because Souness's argument was, if you don't concede goals, a team like Glasgow Rangers will always score. And I know goal scoring has probably been the problem for us the last couple of years. We have been solid defensively, but to up that again, it means that at the current moment, if we score 1 goal, we're going to win the game. If we're defending to this kind of level for the most part of the season, if we get 1 goal, then there's a good chance we're going to win the game. And Roof and Itten have come in, and they look like they're going to be good acquisitions. Itten, I'm still not sure, not in terms of him as a player. I'm just not quite sure, what his role is and where he fits within the team. I've got real high hopes for Roof. I think he looks a good player, and once he gets up to speed, I think he'll score goals for us. So I don't get where some of the negativity is coming from. I don't think we're 2 points away from a perfect start, and we've not conceded any goals. Yeah, some of the performances have been a bit patchy, but if you look at any championship winning season, especially under like Walter Smith, I mean, there's so many games where we were poor and we just scrapped a 1-0 or a 2-1 and boom, move on to the next game. And these points, they stack up, and that's what gets you prizes. You're not going to batter teams every single game. You're going to get out there sometimes, and players are a wee bit off it. And it's the old saying, and I've said it countless times on the pod, you just need to find a way. When you can't win it the way you want to win it, you just need to find a way to win it and get the points and then move on to the next game. So there are aspects of some of our performances I think we need to improve on. I think Steven Gerrard and the players would accept that. But if you'd offered me this at the international break at the start of the season, particularly not conceding, I'd have bitten your hand off. You know what I mean? Especially when you consider, I think it's too early to say that they're in crisis, but Celtic definitely appear to be going through a wee period of disruption at the moment. And so, given that and how we've performed, yeah, I'm delighted. It's a long way to go, but so far so good.
But equally, Colin, you're saying there about maybe grinding out results. Equally, anybody who's watched Rangers over a number of years will have seen Rangers winning 4 or 5-0 at times, and then on their way home, or whether you're sitting in the press box writing about it or summarising it, say to yourself, well, I never thought that was going to be a 4-0 or a 5-0. You know what I mean? It's sometimes you score goals in games where you haven't really played particularly well, and other times you'll have played other teams off the park and maybe managed to win or scrape home, 1-0. I just think just now it might be actually easier to scrutinise what Rangers are doing, simply because you're having to watch the games on TV with no atmosphere and concentrate and focusing on what they're actually doing on the pitch, which means that you see all the sort of rough edges and the flaws in the performances. I think it's been very difficult for every team to have any really any real spark about their game just now, simply because of the circumstances we find them playing in. But equally, I think Rangers have made an impressive start, and if you go through the record books and you look back at even title winning Rangers teams in the start that they made, this is as good a start as anybody has made over a period of years. So again, there's a lot to take out of this this far for Rangers, but I think the real test, the real challenges are just around the corner.
I'd like to pick up on something you mentioned there, Stuart, and we'll get back to the kind of the questions about the state of the squad and the season to come in a moment. But just as you mentioned, a slightly different perspective on things when you're not sat in the stands, so you're not sat in the press box, and you see the game differently. It's got me wondering, obviously, with us sat at home and watching the games on telly or on Rangers TV, as a fan, are you enjoying it? Are you enjoying this new way of watching Rangers?
In general, and actually in general, if I watch games on TV, I tend not to watch them with any commentary or the sound on. I just watch the actual game. I might be quite strange at that. I mean, you hear people saying, "Oh, I just can't get used to this football, just hearing the noisy, of the paper blowing around the stadium." To be honest, I think at times people, obviously they've never watched any reserve matches in their time watching football. Otherwise, they would be, they'd be used to that. I think it's, do I enjoy it? I'm not sure I could say I enjoy it. I'm maybe watching it through different eyes, so to say, and and that you actually look at what players are actually doing, and you notice more about what players are doing. For instance, if you look at it, Rangers midfield wise, you can see that Stephen Davis has more about his game than others. You can see that others take an easy option when it comes to trying to find a pass or trying to make a run or trying to find a space. And I think sometimes you actually notice it. Am I enjoying it? I can't say I'm enjoying it as much as I would do if it was a full stadium and if you were sitting in the middle of 10 or 20 or 30 or 50,000 people. I can't really say that. I think the time is coming for a great many people that they need to see football in the flesh again. They need to see it live because it's quite sanitized the way it is just now. And if anything, a great many people were saying, well, once people start watching football on the TV, they'll never go back to the games. I'll be honest, this is actually, even more than normal. I am really looking forward to getting back to football live and with people around me rather than just sitting, studying it for 2 or 2.5 hours on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon. The quicker it's back to live football and you can turn up for a game, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
I completely agree, Stuart, to the extent that last weekend, I think the rules down here in England are different to up in Scotland, but at a certain level of the non-league, so the junior structure, they've started letting fans back in up to a certain percentage of the ground capacity. And as soon as I heard that, I was looking for a game I could go to. So last weekend, I went to watch a pre-season friendly between Carshalton Athletic and Tunbridge Angels, just because the drive to watch, the desire and the kind of lust to go and watch some live football again was that strong. That being said, I still left 15 minutes early so that I could get time to watch the Rangers game on the telly. Colin, for yourself as well, I mean, obviously, a season ticket holder in the Copeland Rear, a massive change to your weekend routine, I suppose. How are you enjoying this new way of experiencing Rangers?
Well, first thing, I'm in the Govan Rear. Secondly, I can't say I enjoy it, and I think fans been in there add a bit of drama and edge to it. You know, even just the noise that they generate. There was an incident in the game at Pataudry. I can't mind the player who was, but it looked like he was clean through against us, and Balogun came across and sort of sorted it out. But you know, if the fans were in there, you know, once it looked like he was through, you know, all the home fans would be on their feet, and that generates, you know, fear in you. You think, oh, shite, they're in. And it just wasn't there. And even when Kent scored, like, I sort of high-fived the boy and gave him a wee cuddle and all the rest of it. Now, you compare that to when Ryan Jack scored up there when we went 2-0 up. You know, I think Arfield and Jack scored when we went 2-0 up. Me and the boy were rolling about the floor. You know what I mean? It was just like, yes, absolutely jumping about. Whereas the other week there, when there was no fans, it just doesn't. It just doesn't cut it. I don't think. I mean, I understand that that's how it has to be at the moment, and it's frustrating. But it's definitely not the same. I don't care what anybody says, and I kind of I felt for Liverpool through all this. You know, after 30 years, you know, when they did win it, you know, it was in an empty stadium and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, it is what it is, and I enjoy having it back. But it's certainly nowhere near what I'm used to. I mean, football's all about, you know, as people say, it's a family and all the rest of it. It's certainly a community. You know what I mean? And I sit next to the same guys. I sit next to my son and a couple of other guys that sit around about me. And so you chat away and you get to know people and they become friends. And therefore, when Rangers score, you celebrate more because you're celebrating these moments with your friends and pals and all the rest of it. And that's kind of what you look forward to. You look forward to that interaction with your mates as well. So, no, it's not the same. I miss getting into the city. I miss the buzz. I miss Ibrox. I mean, I've not been to Ibrox since this all started. You know what I mean? I think I've only been into Glasgow City Centre once since all this started. So, it's not the same. Is it good to have it back? Yeah, because it gives you something to focus on at the weekends, and you know, we're all Rangers supporters and we all want to see them do well, and it's good to have them back. But is it the same? No, it's not even comparable in my opinion. It's night and day.
I think that's a good way of putting it. That said, what I will say is that the quality on Rangers TV has obviously, there's been a lot of investment into that, and the output from that has notably improved. And that's no slight on people like Tom Miller, who I think has done a wonderful job for the club for a number of years. But I'm glad to see that as the demand for Rangers TV has increased, so too has the quality of product. Gents, finally on the squad, and I'll stick with you for this one, Colin. The league table is starting to take shape now, and the teams that you expect to finish towards the top in the European places are kind of edging towards those positions, and the teams at the bottom of the table are teams that you might expect down there. Obviously, there's still the situation of Aberdeen and Celtic having a couple of games in hand thanks to the stupidity of their playing staff. But the league really is starting to form in the way that we would expect it to do so. We've all discussed or suggested the need to strengthen in certain areas, but I think it's probably fair to say now that that's not going to happen unless we move at least one playing asset out of the door, and that will probably be Mr. Morelos. If that doesn't happen, Colin, and we have to stick with the squad that we have, do you have confidence that this group of players, fans or no fans, has the quality and the mentality necessary to win the league this season?
If Mr. Morelos was to stay, I think that might cause us a problem, because, you know, as much as we all love him and as much as he's done such a great job for Rangers, I think his heart is totally set on getting his move. And if that doesn't happen, then I don't quite know where he would be mentally, and whether he would become a bit of a problem within the dressing room, because he strikes me as someone who doesn't deal with that sort of stuff well. You know, his body language recently and the sort of strops that he has. I don't think Steven Gerrard would want that in the dressing room. I certainly wouldn't be keen to have that in the dressing room. So if he does stay, not only does it pose a financial issue in terms of we're not getting the money in to go and look at new players, it's leaving you with a potentially unhappy player, and I think that could cause problems. So I would hope that that deal can be done and done soon, and then we can look to getting people in who, you know, want to be here. And again, I'm not trying to have a go at Morelos. You know, he's done well over the last couple of years. I just feel he's done with us. I think he wants to go. I have a slight suspicion that the relationship between him and Gerrard is all but done, in my opinion. You know, that there's been a couple of occasions in the friendlies and some of the games so far, you know, whenever there's a substitution, you know, Gerrard always comes out and thanks whoever's coming off. There's been a couple of occasions when he hasn't done that with Morelos. Might be reading too much into it, but I feel there's an issue between the two of them. I think Gerrard was done with him when he never came back in a good enough shape for the Hearts Cup tie in February. I think that was a huge game for him as manager. You know, the season was unravelling at that point. It was already looking like that this could be potentially our only hope of silverware, and your top goal scorer comes back overweight and, you know, late, and he has to, you know, discipline him and take him out the side. So I think that at that point Gerrard was done with Morelos. So I think it would be beneficial for everyone concerned that if we thank him for his efforts and his goals so far and get a good fee for him and let him go. I think if he was to stay, I think that could impact on the dynamic within the dressing room.
He's become a distraction, hasn't he? And the whole thing has become a distraction. And then Rangers go and sign another two strikers, which makes the whole situation even more of a distraction, because you then start debating who is actually going to play up front and why these guys have been signed. I think, you know, listen, I think as soon as Ruffin and Itten walked through the door, that was, you know, they could have basically had a revolving door and sent Morelos out the other way, assuming they get the right fee for him. Because I think at that point in time, and given how Rangers have operated under Steven Gerrard with playing with one striker, you know, you don't need four strikers if you're only ever going to play with one. And even if, you know, Defoe get back to fitness, if Morelos wasn't there, even if you wanted to play two strikers, you still have enough scope and a bit of strength and depth to be able to do that. So I think, you know, I think Colin's absolutely right in what he's saying there. I think we are now looking at Morelos getting out the door at Ibrox, but I think, to be honest, this has been a long drawn out process, because I think if Rangers had the option, if there was such a thing as a transfer window in February or March or whenever it was, I think it'd been gone then.
It's going to be a difficult thing, because obviously I think you're both absolutely spot on, but I think it's quite obvious to you know, an outsider looking in that relationship between Morelos and Gerrard seems to be damaged, and the Morelos very much is making moves to engineer his way out of the club. And so that puts the selling club in quite a weak position. I think buying clubs could already sort of say, well, our finances are damaged by COVID. We can't pay as much as we would normally pay. Plus the fact that the player doesn't want to be there, that puts the selling club in a very difficult position, being able to hold out for a higher offer. There's been a long-running saga about Lille. Obviously, we know that there was substantive bids made from Lille, and I'm glad to see that the club didn't just accept the first bid that came along. But if the club has now moved to kind of kill off that interest and move Lille on to other targets, again, look, there's been little bits of gossip about him going to Porto or moving to those clubs in Germany apparently interested. I agree that he will go this window. Of course, we found ourselves on the Gersnet show saying that before about Morelos in previous windows, so we think he's on his way out. But this time it sort of feels like there's a certain inevitability and finality about the whole thing. I just very much hope that the club have been kind of begged by fans over the last probably 5 years to stop underselling our assets and to drive a hard bargain. And it's something that the team across the other end of the city do very, very well, is talk up their players and get very good financial returns for them. We don't seem to have been able to do that for a number of years now, and the fans have rightly criticised the club for doing so. And that's why I think we were all quite happy to see Rangers knock back opening offers from Lille if they weren't meeting expectations. what we hope now is that doesn't backfire in terms of scaring off Rio, who'll move on to our other targets. And then later on in the window, we end up having to accept a lower offer just so that we can recoup something and offset. I think there will be a degree of offsetting the spend that we've already made on Itten and on Hadji and on Kamar Roof, because it's a lot of money that's been spent. And I think a degree of that was banking on some money coming in from Morelos. He's certainly, I don't think he's going to be putting in many more top drawer performances for Rangers to drive up the value in the coming weeks. So it's certainly a difficult position for any club, but I think we've all been impressed with the business done by Ross Wilson so far, and let's hope that continues and he earns himself a nice wee Christmas bonus. Gents, the final thing I want to discuss today, obviously in the lack of Rangers on-field action, we have had some interesting developments off the pitch in terms of the physical redevelopment of Edmiston House. Now, obviously, this is a building that in the past has played a very, very important commercial role to Rangers, acting as kind of a social club type function. And Colin, you were saying just before we came on air that's where they used to house the ticket office and the Rangers pools, amongst other things. Now it's been lying empty for a number of years now, but Rangers have now launched their plans to essentially knock down and rebuild new Edmiston House, and within that there will be contained the cafe, the new kind of Castor Rangers megastore over 2 floors, concert venue, and also a Rangers museum. Now, Stuart, I think that sounds fantastic in theory, but is there I'm going to be very, very cynical here and maybe playing devil's advocate a wee bit. If you build something like a Rangers museum, you will get massive amounts of foot traffic in the first 2 months, as every Rangers fan rushes to see it, but then potentially never visits again. So after that first 6-month period, will anyone ever actually make use of that facility?
I think any mention of a museum or a Hall of Fame or whatever it might be, to be honest, I think you need something that can be visited. However, equally I think that given where we're at in terms of technology and the likes, I think there's a lot to be said for having virtual access to something like this. So I would like there to be, as a football fan, a football historian, somebody who enjoys looking at football through the ages and especially what players have achieved and the like. I would like Rangers to spend time and actually go through the process properly of, one, what they're trying to achieve, and secondly, what it will take to achieve it. I think if you look at boxing's Hall of Fame and other similar facilities in the USA, whether it's individual NFL teams or basketball teams, or whether it's golf, as I say, boxing, baseball, and the likes, I think there's a lot to be able, a lot to learn. The other thing is that if you do it properly and you do put in a facility, you want to make it that if somebody's in Glasgow and they're a football fan, it's something you want them to come and see. If you're going to do that, you want it to be the best, I'll use the phrase here, the best experience possible, because that's what it's all about. So it doesn't really matter where you go in the world. If you're going to look at something, you want whatever Rangers put in to be as, on a par with anything that anybody else has got. Do I think Rangers will achieve that? History tells me that I might be still found, or they might still be found wanting on that. I think what fans want to see and what the club maybe wants to let them see is, it might be two different things. To that end, I would much prefer that Rangers found outside funding, even if it came from the fans, even if it came from 50,000 fans putting 20 quid into it and give them free access forevermore, and spend £1 million on it, and actually come up with something that it's worthwhile visiting, time after time, and with proper historians and guides and a proper tour and all the rest of it, rather than putting something and saying, well, look at what we've got, and actually doing it on the cheap. I don't think that'll get pass marks today. I really don't. I think people expect too much. If you go anywhere, and whether it's you go to Florida or whether you go to the National Motor Museum in Bewley or wherever it might be, people are conscious of what the experience is now, and I don't think that Rangers want to let themselves down if they're putting in a museum or a Hall of Fame. I think it needs to be top drawer.
Colin, how about yourself? What was your immediate reaction to the plans that have come out this week?
Initially, I felt a wee bit of sadness because I've got strong memories of the old Edmiston House, a workplace I used to work many years ago. We used to have our Christmas nights out there, and it was always a great night. As I said, the ticket office was there, and I've dogged the school many a time to go through and queue for tickets at the old Edmiston House. And I was a pools agent at one point as well, so I used to go through. So it was a building that I was in and around. There used to be a Rangers shop in it as well at one point back in the 90s. And when I heard, I think it was David Murray that sold it at one point. I think he sold it to one of his own companies. I think it was Response Handling or something. I can't quite remember, but it became a call centre, and I felt that was a bit of a heresy. Actually, I thought it was terrible when he done that, given the connection that Rangers had with that building. So quite sad to see the old one go, but I think the plans that they have in place, I agree and slightly disagree in some respects with what Stuart said. I agree that they have to do it right, but I think there is an opportunity, and what something Stuart said there about attracting non-Rangers supporters. So, Rangers are pretty well linked to the city centre through the subway and stuff like that. So if they do it properly, and you have to remember, you'll have away supporters coming over from Europe for ties against us. You'll also have supporters coming over for ties against Celtic, who you could attract, say, 10 minutes on the subway, £10 to get in, that'll pass your afternoon, and there's a bar here, and so but it has to be done right. You know what I mean? I think that I've been to the Hampden Museum a couple of times, and it's pretty decent. If they get it right, and they put stuff of genuine interest in there, and they make the experience a good one. Well, one, Rangers supporters will use it. They'll use it on match day. They'll use it in summer holidays and stuff like that for the kids. But you can also pull in supporters or tourists who are non-Rangers supporters, and I think the transport links that Ibrox has to the city centre, I think that gives us something over any other stadium in the city. You know what I mean? It's literally, if you're in the city centre, you jump on that subway, within 10 minutes you're at Ibrox, and for a fairly cheap fare as well. So if they do it right, if they market it right, I did notice a while ago, I was getting off a train at Queen Street, and they've got all the leaflets, of things to do in the city, and there was a pamphlet there for Celtic, come and get a stadium tour, and there's a shop here, and nothing for Rangers. And I just thought, you're missing a trick here. So if they invest the money wisely, if they do everything up the way it should be done, and it's all sort of top class, and if they've done the research and they know how to make it work and attract people who they are going to attract Rangers supporters. Of course, we're going to go there. If you tell me there's a brand spanking new replica of the European Cup Winners' Cup in there, I'm there. You know what I mean? These are the things that I want to see. But you can also pull in folk who are non-Rangers supporters. Glasgow, pulls in a lot of tourists, and we could get our cut of that. We could get some of the footfall from that. So, but as I said earlier, it has to be done right. If they try and do it, as Stuart said earlier, on the cheap, then it won't work. It has to be a quality experience.
I think that's a very good way of looking at it, actually, is the market that Glasgow offers, and ensuring that you tap into that market is crucially important. And I think this is where it comes down again to the role of James Bisgrove, and the amount of times that I mention him on the show. Everyone's probably thinking that I'm his biggest fan, but I do think he's done an exceptional job so far, and I'd hope to see that continue. Now, Stuart, obviously, I'll kind of come to you with the last word on this. mentioning that the experience for consumers these days is very, very important, rather than just going and visiting something and reading plaques and all the rest of it. Look, next year is our 150th anniversary, despite what rival fans will tell you, and the redevelopment of Edmiston House is a key part of that celebration. What else would you like to see the club do to commemorate that anniversary?
Just touching on the just for a second, go back to the museum. I mean, you have to remember that whilst Ibrox is synonymous with Rangers, equally you've had Commonwealth Games rugby played there. You've had Jim Watt fighting Howard Davis in a world lightweight title. You've had Eric Liddell running there against the top Americans. So there's another strand to this that you would actually you could expand that into other sports. In terms of what Rangers do for the anniversary, again, and I'll say it again, Rangers can't really scrimp on this one. They can't do this on the cheap. They have to be doing it in such a way that it's an anniversary year. And what I will say, for those that say, give the Rangers are only a couple of years old, what hatred they show for somebody who's just such an infant or a youngster, isn't it? But anyway, the anniversary is something that should be commemorated, but it has to be done properly. I mean, I remember when the centenary stand at Ibrox and the whole thing about the European Super Cup with Ajax and that kind of thing. Those are the kind of glamour friendlies matches, or the kind of glamour challenge games that Rangers want to be playing to mark the occasion. And you want a series of events to mark the year rather than just a kind of one-off event. So again, I actually think this will be something in tandem with what the development is around Ibrox and Edmiston House. I think this is actually something that the fans will be quite judgmental on. I think there's a great many people that know that such anniversaries only come round once in a lifetime or once in a generation, for instance. And I think that Rangers have to do it and do it well. And I think the fans will be quite scathing on Rangers as a club and as a business if they don't do it properly, because I think it's also a chance for people to invest back into the club. It's also a chance to people to show their support of the club in different ways, and I think people will only do that if it's something that's either worth seeing or worth watching.
I think that's a very nice way of putting it, and what's important is that we have a generation of Rangers fans growing up who do not know or did not get to experience the success that Rangers had historically, and that I'm sure we'll continue to have in the future. And I don't count myself as being too far removed from that. I was 20 years old when we went into administration, so I supported the club through very, very successful times as a boy, but I've not really been able to carry that through into adulthood. Now you'll have the generation one below me who have kind of started following Rangers undoubtedly because their dad did and their granddad did, who wouldn't have seen Rangers or wouldn't be able to experience Rangers as a dominant force in Scottish and European football. And so to keep that generation, interested and knowledgeable of the history of Rangers as a dominant team, I think is crucially important. And the 150th anniversary is the perfect time to do that, to make sure that the history does live on in the eyes of a generation who haven't been lucky enough to kind of witness it firsthand yet. And that's why I think there's a huge amount riding on whatever we've got planned for next year. Gents, I kind of made a wee joke at the top of the show that we would very much struggle to fill an hour with no Rangers football to talk about. I can only apologise for the fact that we've managed to ramble on for an extra 5 minutes. So sorry to everyone who's listening who was bored stiff, but I think there was some very, very interesting things to talk about there. I'd like to say
alarm for us.
Listen, I'd like to say, as always, a massive thank you to both Colin and Stewart for giving up their Sunday evenings to join us and to give us their very interesting insight, as always. The show will be back next weekend, thankfully, with some football to talk about as we make our long-awaited reconciliation with the Tangerines of Dundee United. Will surely be a very, very interesting show, and I'm just delighted that we can actually talk about a football match again. As I say, the Gersnet is not just a podcast, but also we have a huge amount of information over on the website at www.gersnet.co.uk. Please do head over there, check it out, and join the friendly discussion forum where you can find all of the Gersnet podcast contributors. The only other thing to say is a massive thank you, as always, for listening. In these troubled times, please do keep safe and look after each other, and have a great week.